Hey everyone, it's Insel here. So it has been quite a while since I've made a client comparison video. In fact, it has been about 8 months since I made a video reviewing all the most popular clients at the time, that being Badlion client, Lunar client, PvP Lounge client, and Hyperion. So ever since then, a lot has happened to those clients, specifically Badlion client and Lunar client. So today I want to make an updated video going over the changes and, more importantly, what client you should play on based on your needs, and also which client gives the most FPS. So with that being said, let's get straight into the video. So a lot has happened with Lunar client and Badlion client since I've last talked about them. Lunar client finally has 1.8 support, which has been a thing for a while, but I haven't made a video on it in forever. Badlion client and Lunar client have support for Mac OS, which is really nice. And both Lunar client and Badlion client are pushing out constant updates, which is really nice to see. It goes to show that both of them really do care about the community. So I know a lot of you guys probably came here to see an FPS comparison. I'll get into that later. I'll leave timestamps in the description if you just want to skip to it, but the first thing that I want to talk about are features. So I'm going to start with Badlion client, and you can see that there are a ton of mods. There are so many mods. If you're looking for features, then Badlion client's the clear winner here by far. There's stuff on Badlion client that's exclusive to Badlion client, like Schematica, Replay mod, MLG Cobweb. I don't even know what this is. Getting into every module would just take way too much time, but if you're someone who uses very particular mods, you are probably going to like Badlion client. Again, this thing has so many features, so many mods. Props to them for constantly adding new features. Lunar client, on the other hand, does have a lot of mods, but it doesn't have anywhere near as mods as Badlion client, and that's completely fine because you have to recognize that Lunar and Badlion are sort of targeting different audiences here. Lunar client prioritizes PvP, so if you're a PvPer like myself, then all the PvP mods that you want, you're probably already going to find in Lunar client. Badlion client, on the other hand, is catered towards a much more general audience, which is why they have things such as Schematica, Replay mod. It's also why on Badlion client you have a ton more versions to choose from, so you even have like the newest snapshots here, which I didn't even know about. Badlion's goal with their client is one client that does everything, so no matter whether you're PvPing, you're playing survival Minecraft, you're just playing arcade game modes, whatever, their client is made to do all that, unlike Lunar, where the only versions that it has is 1.7 and 1.8, which as a PvPer is completely fine for me, because those are going to be the only versions that I'm spending my time on anyways, so having other versions doesn't really matter. The next thing I want to talk about is the user experience that the clients provide to the player, and I'm going to start off with the Lunar client because in my opinion, Lunar client has a much better user experience than Badlion client. Going into the settings tab, the first thing I want to talk about is that there are not a lot of modules displayed at once, and this is sort of annoying because it's sort of a waste of space. It makes stuff feel way too cluttered. It also makes it sort of a pain to navigate to other modules. I have no idea why they're this big. They really don't need to be, but that's really the only complaint I have with Lunar client because the rest of this all feels very intuitive. So all the modules are organized into different categories. So you have the new tab up here, which is all the new stuff that they've added, which is really nice. HUD, all your HUD tabs, server related mods, game mechanic mods. I like how everything is neatly organized, so it makes it really easy to find stuff. And that doesn't just go for the mods too. Your settings are also very organized, so you can see it's very easy to navigate. Everything is labeled with titles here, so it is easy to find pretty much whatever setting you're going for. The way everything is organized in this client is very intuitive and feels very refined. I also really like as soon as you go into the Lunar client menu, you can just organize all your modules right here, right off the bat, and I think that's really nice. Now Badlion client is completely different, so going into the mods menu right here, nothing is organized. You can see more things at once, which I will give it, but it doesn't look nearly as good as Lunar client. Once again, nothing is really organized, and it's a bigger deal for me, especially since Badlion client has so many mods within it. You'd think that this gear icon is the settings, but no, it's a slide out settings, which doesn't really need a dedicated module for. All the settings are mostly under the graphics tab right here, and none of this is organized either. Everything is just all piled up and cluttered into one tab, and some of the stuff doesn't even make sense. Like for example, ping numbers, and basically what that is just ping on tab, but like why would that be under graphics? The organization in this client is very sub-tier, especially when compared to Lunar client. Like Another thing, if you go to other, you just have 3 settings here. Why is there a tab for only 3 settings? Why don't you just create one tab called settings and actually organize it so it's easy to navigate? Like, I don't know if it's just me, but Badlion client just feels extremely outdated, especially with how it looks. And that's not just with the client settings either, that extends to like the entire visual aesthetic of the client. So I'm just gonna flash up some stuff on screen here. So I'm just gonna compare some of the Badlion client modules with their Lunar client counterparts, and I know this is completely subjective, but for me, Lunar client just looks way more aesthetic. It just looks way more modern, and the client just feels more refined, and Badlion client just feels so outdated. And this even goes as far as with Badlion's own logo, which is this like yellow and blue colorway. And like, who uses this type of colorway in 2020? Like, it really doesn't feel like it matches the 2020 modern aesthetic. In my opinion, Badlion client needs a complete revamp with their entire aesthetic, not just for their client, but for their entire branding in general. But once again, these are stuff that is completely subjective, and none of this is gonna impact your gameplay at all. This is just impacting your user experience. Okay, so moving on to the FPS comparison, I'm gonna be doing this 2 different ways. So first here, I have a single player world with a pre-downloaded map. I've made a little minecart thing, and it's going to take me through this course. Basically, I'm gonna start on the minecart. My aim is going to be in the very center of this button, and I'm going to let it run me through the track on both clients. The next test is gonna be a little more of a real world scenario, so I'm just gonna go on a server and get into a fight. By the way, I'm using the exact same settings. I've closed all background applications. I'm using the exact same amount of RAM. Basically, these tests are gonna be as fair as possible. And then at the end, I will discuss the results. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get started with the tests. Okay, so starting with a single player world, Badlion client for the most part stayed around the mid 600s to the mid 700s range for FPS. It never dropped below 600 FPS, but it never really exceeded 700 FPS either. Lunar client, on the other hand, was in the mid 700s to mid 800s range. It never dropped below 700 FPS for me, and it was pretty consistently in the 700 to 800 range. On the classic duels with Badlion client, I was usually around 400 to 500 FPS, sometimes going to 600. It didn't really drop below 400, and it was pretty uncommon for me to see anything above 600 FPS. With Lunar client, on the other hand, I was consistently at 500 to 600 FPS, and I was pretty occasionally hitting even 700 and above. So between the two tests, I'm pretty consistently getting 100 to 200 more FPS on Lunar client as opposed to Badlion client. Your results may vary because I have a pretty beefy computer. If you don't have an absolutely spec'd out computer, then you're probably going to see a lot less of a difference. I've heard from most people's experience that Lunar client does give the most FPS, so if you are looking for something to boost your FPS, then Lunar client is the way to go. Anyways guys, that's pretty much it for this video. I hope you guys found it informative. For me personally, I'm probably going to be using Lunar client from now on. I record in higher FPSs, so having more FPS does mean a lot to me, and I also really like the way the modules look as opposed to Badlion client. However, once again, if you're all about features, then Badlion client is the way to go. They just have more mods, they have more versions of Minecraft supported. It really just depends on what your priorities are. I want to say thank you guys for watching, and thank you guys so much for 10k subs. We did reach 10k recently. I made a few posts about it on my community tab and my Twitter. I have a 10k video in the works, but I do not know when it will be done, so please be patient with me. I hope you guys enjoy this video. Let me know what client you guys prefer down in the comments, and with that being said, I will see you guys in the next video. Peace out.